since 2001, there's this absurd obsession with terrorism. So anytime a regulator gets up and says, well, Bitcoin can be used for terrorism, well, of course it can. So can anything. So can cell phones, and so can the internet, and so can a car. It doesn't mean that we should, stifle the growth of those industries just because bad people can use it.
This has arguably been the worst week in the cryptocurrency's short life, stung by the collapse of once dominant exchange Mt. Gox. Now that failed firm's CEO Mark Karpeles is in hiding. Some 750,000 bitcoins allegedly stolen or lost, which accounts for about 6% of the total circulation.
By the time Mt. Gox went down, it was holding what its customers believed were about $500 million worth of their bitcoins and the company's bitcoins. It was no longer the largest exchange in the world, but part of what's so amazing is that people kept using it even after there had been numerous incidents in which it was clear that the company was not up to the task of safeguarding the money.
And the only reason he survived as long as he did was because in 2013, the price started going up. People kept putting money into it. He had more and more money because the price was going up. But as soon as the price started going down, and this is what happened, right? It peaks in late 2013, starts coming down in 2014. As soon as that price started coming down, it all just tumbled for him. Gox was going to collapse. That it lasted as long as it did was actually kind of a stroke of fate.
But its failure was it didn't have the kind of more boring mainstream institutional controls that we require to bring it to the next level.
And there's a whole bunch of money missing, and no one knows if they just lost it, if it was stolen from them, if they embezzled it, or what. But the important lesson from Gox isn't that Bitcoin doesn't work. The important lesson from Gox is that you don't leave your money with a trusted third party, because you can't always trust them. You can only trust them until you can't. This was also a lesson that people were supposed to learn during the financial crisis, but they don't seem to have learned it yet.
Mark Karpeles was a gamer. He was not a finance pro. He really didn't know what he was doing, and he didn't build it. Jed McCaleb built it. He didn't improve upon it. I mean, it lurched from crisis to crisis throughout the entire history.
Last year was a terrible year for Bitcoin, and especially a terrible year for the foundation, because we had two of the people on our board of directors who had to resign in disgrace, basically. My expertise is technology. My expertise is not figuring out who's trustworthy, who's not, which businesses are going to succeed, which businesses are going to fail.
After we had held our hearings, we thought we would take 6 months to 9 months, even a year, to draft our initial regulations. This was so complicated that we wanted to really take our time and get it right. What happened was, though, Mt. Gox collapsed. And I think that gave us a real renewed sense of urgency, and we realized that if we got regulation right, we could create more confidence in Bitcoin, frankly, as opposed to the sort of loss of confidence you saw, not only from the Silk Road case, but also from the collapse of Mt. Gox.
So your sense, though, of the regulators right now,
right.
I assume you've had conversations.
The discussions that we've had, I think everybody recognizes the innovation and doesn't want to stifle it. They just want to make sure that there's healthy regulation, so it's used in a safe and productive manner.
I'm not giving up on New York. New York's giving up on me. I can't even turn on a Bitcoin machine. An ATM, I can't turn it on. I can't make trades. I can't do anything. There's no cash flow at all. And it's potential regulation. It's regulation that I should believe is coming down the pipe. I don't want to do anything that someone's frowning upon right next door to the stock market. They're going to lock me up. You can't have an exchange. Well, we don't. People meet then and exchange with each other. New York's sitting there on the high horse, and the whole world's waiting on New York to create some fucking license.
Ultimately, Charlie Lofsky's office brought out the final rules for the BIT license in the spring of 2015. A lot of companies complained that the regulations were too burdensome for them to operate in New York and still make money.
I saw just overnight dozens of companies that were on the verge of launching. They just threw in the towel and said, we can't afford this.
Eric Voorhees' new company, Shapeshift, would have had to apply for the BIT license if it wanted to keep customers in New York.
So in my lap here I have the application forms for license to engage in virtual currency business activity, which is a very statist way of saying the BIT license. This is the application to be approved to do basically what we've all been doing for years now, which is building Bitcoin companies in New York. And a lot of stuff in here I personally feel is unethical, so we're not going to comply with it, which means we have to block New Yorkers entirely. And when an entire new industry starts blocking a place like New York that used to be the financial center of the world, hopefully some of those politicians will take notice.
The point of it is to, one, make sure there are enough consumer protections, two, make sure we have adequate cybersecurity, three, make sure that the companies are adequately capitalized so they don't collapse upon themselves.
You know, you've seen a tug of war between the hardliners and those who are saying, you know, you've got to have enough space for innovation in here. And the system has come out, I think, probably stronger as a result of that. And there's a widespread view amongst certainly the business Bitcoin community that some level of regulation gives legitimacy to what they're doing. It gives people confidence in what they're doing. This is an important part of growing up.
Ultimately, they're not going to get it right because no regulation is ever right. But I'm highly confident that whatever happens going forward, the BIT license will be looked at as a positive development in the evolution of Bitcoin, because it just removed one of the biggest pieces of uncertainty, which is how is this industry going to be regulated?
I think most of us, at least a lot of us, think that sensible regulation that sets guidelines, that makes sure people's money doesn't just go into a black hole, that's a really important thing, that regulation.
I'm sure Satoshi wouldn't be happy to see this kind of thing, which is not based on the logic and reason that a programmer is used to. I think a lot of developers, understandably so, try to stay out of the political nonsense.
It has been one of the biggest mysteries raging across the internet. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Newsweek published an article claiming the man in these images is the Bitcoin founder. The man who created Bitcoin is known as the father of Bitcoin, the online currency now worth billions.
When you asked him about Bitcoin and he says, I can't talk about this anymore, he was not referring to Bitcoin.
But with me, he definitely acknowledged Bitcoin. I think at this point now he's saying he was confused by the conversation. Clearly somebody thought that we did this as an act of war against Satoshi Nakamoto or Bitcoin, and I want to be very clear that I certainly never meant it that way.
I have nothing to do with Bitcoin.
It was a monster story. How did they figure it out? Oh my God, look at this guy that they named. His name is Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto, living in California, basically hiding in plain sight. It becomes a gigantic media scramble. And then Dorian emerges from his house looking kind of disheveled, looking kind of confused, and says he's not Satoshi Nakamoto, says he's never heard of Bitcoin. He doesn't understand. He had one conversation with Leah. She misunderstood what he said. She took it the wrong way. And you probably would have had to have been a cypherpunk to understand all the elements of it that had already been put together. The odds of it seem very low to me that it was somebody from completely outside that community who happened to know all these different things and put this together and appear out of nowhere.
The day that Newsweek's story came out, naming Dorian Nakamoto as the creator of Bitcoin, I got this email from an old acquaintance that was titled, "What Are the Odds?" And it laid out the fact that Hal Finney lives less than 2 miles away from the known address of Dorian Nakamoto, where Newsweek had found him. And Hal Finney is the #2 ever user of Bitcoin, who received the first Bitcoin transaction. He works on an early prototype of an anonymous currency system. He was a cypherpunk. So how could it be that the purported creator of Bitcoin and this known, confirmed second ever user of Bitcoin hadn't ever collaborated? That Hal Finney, who was less than 2 miles away from Dorian Nakamoto hadn't helped to create Bitcoin, or maybe he really was the creator of Bitcoin. Maybe Hal Finney was Satoshi Nakamoto.
When you look at the Bitcoin white paper, it made reference to a lot of the earlier projects that fed into Bitcoin, but it's very notable that the one project it doesn't refer to is Nick Szabo's Bitgold, which is perhaps the closest precedent and the closest parallel to Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, Bitgold is so close to Bitcoin, it's hard not to think that, maybe Nick is Satoshi.